Hello everyone, welcome to Canteen Cup. I hope everybody is doing well, and I will say a Merry Christmas today because I may or may not do another video before the holiday is upon us. I hope everybody can keep the Christmas spirit in their hearts, their minds, and their prayers. I do have a little celebration today. My channel now has 100 subscribers. That's awesome. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Spread the word. I know my channel is a little bit different, but I appreciate your support, and I hope you continue as we go into the new year to support me by subscribing. I don't have any fees or anything, and I kind of keep it that way. I feel that God has given me plenty, and it is my responsibility to share. So what I wanted to talk about today, and I'm moving around a little bit, I'm just trying to find a good spot to chat because that sun is awful bright today and it's low in the sky, and it's nailing me wherever I go. So today I want to talk about thinking. Like the Aretha Franklin song says, you gotta think. And I feel in today's world we don't have enough thinking going on. I mean, yeah, people are thinking, but they're not doing what is called critical thinking, and I think that's important. And I have some definitions to help talk about that. I had to write them down because a little bit more than my old mind can remember. But critical thinking, and you can Google this, is the analysis of facts to form a judgment, which generally include the rational, skeptical, unbiased analysis or evaluation of factual evidence. It entails effective communication and problem-solving abilities, as well as a commitment to overcome native egocentrism and ethnocentrism. Lots of big words, but the reality is, and I'll talk about the egos and the ethnos in a little bit, but really what this is saying is that you have to discover the facts. And I think that's where many of us get waylaid. We read it on Reddit, or we read it on Twitter, or we read it in Facebook, and well, shoot, we even read it in some or see it in some of the media or YouTube, and we think that it's true, and we go no further than that, saying, oh yeah, I saw that on Twitter, therefore it has to be true. You need to do your research. You need to go beyond that, and you need to say it's true beyond a doubt, because too many people today, and I have a multitude of examples, but I want to keep this video kind of short. But just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. Now, how do you figure out what the truth is? Well, you have to do your research. In other words, you read something, your first question might be, okay, where did this guy get this from? And so you try to find the original source. Hopefully it's some sort of research paper, or some paper that at least has footnotes that you can take it another step and look at those footnotes. And I will give you a great example. This is something I did. Now, mind you, I have worked as a management analyst for years. I am an analyst. What I do today in the world, I analyze. And so I have some experience in this. But without getting into lots of names or whatever, there was a guy, and he once said that the U.S. population will die like within 30 days if the grid goes down. 90%. And so I took it upon myself to find out where he got that information from. And I found his original document where he said that, and there is no footnotes to any scientific research one way or the other whether that's true or not. So in other words, he just made it up. Oh yeah, and the guy has a doctorate, and so you say, oh, this is really cool. He's a doctor, so it's got to be right because he's a doctor. Well, I looked at his biography, and he's got like a doctorate in English or history. So, you know, he's got an unsubstantiated claim in a field that he's not expert in, but all over the place you see people using this quote and they're not doing their research. And so my comment is whether this is true or false or whatever, you need to sit there and you need to research what you're doing before you possibly make a fool of your own self. You know, Wikipedia, I use it, but you know, when I go to a Wikipedia article, I read the footnotes, and where possible I go to those footnotes, and I at least read enough of those footnotes. In other words, I go back to the original research to determine if what they're really saying is at least factual to my understanding, and at least factual enough to where I can sit there and say, yeah, I really think this is true because here is the research behind what this guy said. So I use Wiki, but I'm careful how I use it. So when you're critically thinking, you got to base your analysis, you've got to base your judgment on facts, and they've got to be as verifiable as possible, not some thread on Reddit or Twitter or Facebook or some of these forums or others. People just say things. It's amazing what people will say even during an emergency. They just make stuff up. So be careful. And that's all I'm saying is be careful. All right, the egos and the ethnos. And this is important. Egocentrism is the inability to differentiate between self and other. More specifically, it is the inability to accurately assume or understand any perspective other than one's own. In other words, you base your judgments on your bias only. And in reality, in critical thinking, you need to step outside of that. And you might sit there and say, well, it's not something that I would do. However, in forming my opinion, I understand that other people might do this or think this. And so sometimes you have to pull yourself back a step and say, well, I wouldn't do that, but I understand why it is. And therefore, when I base my judgment or my opinion or whatever, I look at it from the whole and not from me. Because we all have personal biases, and if we can't escape those, at least when we're thinking, then we are suffering from egocentrism. Now the other one, ethnocentrism, it means to apply one's own culture or ethnicity as a frame of reference in order to judge other cultures, practices, behaviors, beliefs, and people, instead of using the standards of the particular culture involved. This is more detailed, and probably possibly a good example might be different people talking about their different religions. And it always comes down to, I mean, I've heard this time and time again, if I wasn't of somebody else's faith, I would hear, well, you're going to hell because you're not this. And that's ethnocentrism, when the reality of that might be is we are all, and I'll just use Christians, we are all Christians, you know, and what we should be talking about is what we have in common and not what we have different. And we have the all understanding that in hopes, if we all do the things that God wants us to do, we're all going to end up in the same place, other than, you know, not counting these little in particulars of each individual religion. So That's kind of ethnocentrism. These aren't great examples. I'm just kind of throwing them out there to kind of give you a frame of reference that when you are critically thinking, that you've got to pull out some of your own biases, and not only your own personal biases, but the biases of your culture. And what that will do is that'll help you to determine what the truth is. And isn't that really what we want, is the truth? We want the truth to come out. We want the truth to prevail. And we want it to prevail whether we like it or not. In some of the things I've taken on as for critical thinking, yeah, I didn't like it, but it is what it is, and I have to accept that. And so, during this holiday season, I hope everybody has peace. I hope everybody can find at least a little spot of joy somewhere in this world. And really, this video is not to chastise or denigrate or whatever. I'm just offering you the opportunity to, maybe if you're not a good critical thinker, to maybe adopt some of this stuff to help you in the future, because critical thinking is important. Now, something else I want to talk about while we're talking about thinking is what I call symmetrical and asymmetrical thinking. And the best way to describe that is, when you are doing symmetrical thinking, you are following the norms of what you have learned, what you have seen, maybe even what you have done. In other words, in your thinking, you sit there and say, well, I've done this before, and so A follows B, B follows A, C follows B, D follows C. A, B, C, D. That's the way we do things. 1, 2, 3, 4. And an example might be that we are, in the prepper world today, we always like to talk about guns, knives, bullets, and then military operations. And what we see a lot of today is we see a lot of people following military models, particularly here in the U.S. Army or Marine tactics. And that is we'll call that a symmetrical, way of thinking. We're going to do what they do because it works. But let me throw a wrench in there about this. And that is, if you have an Army patrol, we'll say an 11-man squad, and you are going to go out on patrol, well, understand that the ratio of support personnel to patrol person can be somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 1. In other words, for every person that goes on patrol, there are 7 people behind that person supporting them. So that would mean for an 11-man patrol, there's 77 people behind them supporting them. Now, I don't think anybody's mag is that big. Maybe, but in general, probably not. And so then if you're thinking symmetrically, and you think, well, we're going to do the patrol just like the Army, but we don't have support, are you setting yourself up for failure? And what would happen if you were on patrol and you made contact with, we'll say, an organized military unit, we'll just say the U.S. government, and you come in contact, and both of you are squad sized. However, the opposing squad has that 77-man support, and they have gunships and rockets and jets and mortars and artillery. You see, when you start looking at it from that way, symmetrical may not be good. So let's take a look at this same scenario where we may have an asymmetrical look at it. Well, instead of being all military and being all, in the patrol, everybody's got uniforms and the same loadout and the same, web gear and stuff, that instead you move to where everybody is dressed like everybody else in the neighborhood or in the community or whatever. And that maybe instead of carrying AR-15s with 6 magazines and you know, 40 pounds of gear and armor plate and stuff. You're dressed kind of like I am, except underneath your, underneath your sweatshirt, you have a pistol and maybe a couple magazines. And you walk through your area and you make contact. And instead of being, in a, in forming, going into a contact where you are exchanging fire, that your group splits, falls apart, disseminates into the woods and then back into the community, where you now look like everybody else, and then the opposing force will have more difficulty finding you. That may be an asymmetrical. Again, these are examples, and I'm not saying that this is the way it should be, this is the way it is. I'm just saying that you need to think outside of the box, especially when you talk about tactics where you do not have the advantage. Even if your little group came upon a determined SWAT or HRT team, you are at a disadvantage already, because they got buddies and you don't. And so when we go about our preps, when we go about whatever we do, apply critical thinking, apply, when need be, asymmetrical thinking, and then occasionally, or if you need to, apply symmetrical, but be able to determine which one is best without being egocentric or ethnocentric, and then saying, yeah, I really want to be just like, the Army Rangers, go on patrol and have all this stuff, when the reality is, man, let's just slough around in our Carhartts and see what we can see, and if something happens, we just kind of disperse, and we rendezvous back somewhere else. It's all about staying alive, it's all about staying healthy, it's all about doing the best you can, and sometimes following the norms is not the best. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not saying you guys are right or wrong. That's up to you to determine. I'm just trying to give you a couple tools to help you along the way. So that's all I have for you for today. Everybody stay safe and stay secure, and Merry Christmas to all.